Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Moon. I'm your host for this evening, Lawrence Ray, and today I'm joined by my wonderful co-hosts, Ricardo Martinez and Jerry. And we are interviewing for the second time, which I think is a first on this show, the passionate, smart Bitcoiner, John Carvalho, who announced recently at the Adopting Bitcoin Lightning Summit that he is the CEO and is leading up Synonym at synonym.to, a Bitcoin company. So I guess first off, John, how you doing?
Oh, I'm pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Wonderful, thank you. In chilly England, I must say. What about you guys, Ricardo and Jerry?
I'm doing great.
Well, I'm doing pretty hot, and it's actually real hot, about 35, 40 degrees-ish. So yeah, forgive me if I'm going to be a bit sweaty.
Anyway, John, I guess to get us started off, first question for you, Synonym. I was obviously at the summit, but could you give us a very nice summary, ideally for people who are not, super technical or anything? What is it? What is the goal? What are you doing?
Sure, I can give it a try. So basically, Synonym is like my vision of, or I shouldn't say only mine, our whole team's vision of, trying to model what it would look like if we actually had the concept of hyper Bitcoinization, or basically like Bitcoin being like the majority store of value for the whole world or most of the world. And so it involves basically like asking the questions like, what if we really don't have government involved in the economy anymore? What if we don't have those like the regulations related to that? What if we don't have big banks? What if we don't have big tech like Facebook and Twitter and all these things? What would the digital economy actually look like? And so we took that kind of premise and tried to make a whole kind of ecosystem of software and technology that we think that currently doesn't exist, to kind of fill in all the gaps, to make sure that like there's at least one tool set available for everybody that wants to kind of opt out of the current paradigm and live in a kind of Bitcoin only framework. So it's kind of like taking the concept, which I'm sure your listeners will be familiar with, of circular economy, and adding a couple more sort of facets to that concept. And so we have our own concept called the atomic economy, which is basically combining the concept of circular economy, like efficiency, the minimization of conversion, these kinds of physical concepts, with the concept of a web of trust and a self-sovereign web. And so this basically allows you to kind of reconstruct the web based off of your own abstract topics that you apply to others. So this is how you decide how you define reputation, who you can trust and who is even in your networks at all. And we're trying to do this in a very interoperable way. So we have a whole series of products, and we have an additional like protocol that we're creating to enable all of this. And yeah, I guess that's scratching the surface of what we're doing, basically.
John, can you explain what a web of trust is?
Sure. Web of trust is basically a concept of, it's a pre-existing design pattern, I guess you could call it, in cryptography, where people use key pairs, much like Bitcoin key pairs, except originally they weren't using Bitcoin key pairs, but our protocol does. We have our protocol that we're working on is called /tags, and we use Bitcoin key pairs because we want to take advantage of the pre-existing, applications that already back up and store Bitcoin key pairs for Bitcoin. /tags doesn't use the Bitcoin blockchain at all. It just uses the same elliptic curve that's used to create keys for Bitcoin. And so a web of trust is basically taking the concept of everybody identifying themselves as a key, or a key pair, which gives them the capability to like sign proofs and prove that they are that key and own that key and have possession of that key. So it's sort of like an authentication method. And then it uses that concept and then allows you to now apply some sort of metadata to any other key inside of the network, or inside of like, it could be a centralized database. It doesn't really matter. If you want to like kind of look into a good example, like before there were Bitcoin exchanges, there was a concept called the Bitcoin OTC Web of Trust. And you can search that right now. The database is still online. It's basically something they integrated with IRC chats, so people could do like peer-to-peer trading with each other and establish a reputation of like completing trades. So if you search that on Google and you find that website, I forget the actual domain name, you'll actually see some names you recognize in the database. Like there's like Luke Dasher and maybe GMax. I don't remember. There's like some people that are in there. Like everybody that's in there has like a handle in there, and they have like either their Bitcoin key and or their PGP key as a way to identify themselves. And then every time that people did business together, like did a trade or, you know, anything that they felt like rating each other on, they would submit a signed message to the database that said like a comment about the trade and a score of -10 to +10 in range. So Web of Trust is just this concept of, you know, using keys to, you know, tag metadata to other keys. And the metadata, it basically represents some sort of topic and some sort of range. And now once you have this topic and range, if you rate somebody, say +10, that puts them on a scale. And so, so on the Web of Trust concept, you can kind of like combine it with the concept of, you probably heard of the idea of like 7 degrees of separation, like how many people you have to kind of know to reach everybody on Earth. Web of Trust has a similar concept where it weights your Web of Trust based off of distance from you trust-wise. And so the people that you rate highly, the people that they rate highly are now like a second layer of your Web of Trust, because you can have some like associative trust because you trust them and they trust somebody else. And the same goes for like negative trust. Like if you trust someone but they do not trust somebody else, you will now trust that person less as well. And you can kind of keep going out in rings in distance of trust from you to kind of use this network as a way to either establish private networks, or, you know, who you want to like allow to have feed data from you, or even just establishing like who to actually search for information and trust in the future. And so you can basically filter your Web of Trust and use this filtering mechanism as a way to establish permissions or searches or, you know, networks in general.
Yeah, so that explanation to me makes things a little bit clearer as well. So I guess, tell me if I'm wrong here. My assumption or my understanding from what I've read on it and from what you've said yourself, is that we're kind of looking at an alternative internet that's built on Lightning, kind of, or like a separate internet, kind of with this Web of Trust that's kind of built on Lightning or using.
Has nothing to do with Lightning. I'll correct you there.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, you correct me first off. But I guess we're trying to talk about creating something where people, as you said, can kind of opt out of what we're currently doing, AWS and all these kind of centralized services, into another sort of form or section of internet, I suppose, where you've got, and you guys are providing services like /tags is like a wallet, but it also does more than that. Like, it allows you to store passwords and things. And then there's obviously going to be more things that you do. Is that kind of right, that you're kind of trying to create this alternative kind of internet, I suppose, to a degree? Is that,
there are some semantics there that I probably need to correct, because like the internet is just a concept for all of the networks that are compatible with each other. And so it's not a separate internet, because like when people think about internet, they think about like internet access, like an internet service provider. And so we're not going to be like providing a new network for people to connect to in the concept on the layer of an internet. So it would be more accurate to say it would be an alternative web. And it matches nicely with the word Web of Trust anyway. So you can have the World Wide Web and you can have the Web of Trust separately as separate concepts. Now, they're not incompatible. You can still have World Wide Web websites be accessible through World Wide Web, you know, networking concepts and such, but it's just basically a networking concept. And another probably semantic thing I should correct is like with /tags, /tags is not a service, it's a protocol. And so it's an open protocol. Anybody can use it and apply it however they want to. And even calling it a protocol is a bit of a, you know, it's just for convenience, because it's almost more a method. It's a way of using keys, you know, to do a lot of different use cases, basically. And so once we have built out the use cases for /tags that include like the ability to establish like private networks based on your Web of Trust data, then I would be more comfortable just saying it's a Web of Trust. But like there are a lot of other use cases, particularly the ones that we've released so far, that don't even involve, you know, a web per se. And so it's more like a method of using keys for authentication. And what's special about /tags is there are other tools that people use for using keys for authentication. LNURL auth is an example. You can find that is, you know, quote unquote based on Lightning, but it also doesn't require Lightning as a technology either. And so what we're trying to do is like make it so not only do you have keys, but you also have this kind of formalized way of attaching metadata to keys. And so basically, anytime you communicate using slash tags, you're also communicating a schema. And that schema is basically like data about how you form data about keys. And so it's just basically, it's like a structure for assigning metadata. And so basically you can think of it as like one schema could be like movie categorization, and it could include like a map of all the different like fields essentially of like all the different things of metadata you would assign to a movie, like title, you know, director, all the actors, you know, the year it was released, all of these different stats. And so if you use this schema and you attached a key to say Frozen 2, you could like attach all of the metadata about Frozen 2 to that key and assign that file to that key. And you could also start assigning like ratings to that key. So you could say, okay, let me use the movie categorization schema with the movie rating schema, and I'm going to apply ratings to these movies. And you could do this in a way that is like in mutual networks. So basically the data becomes portable and it's not part of a walled garden. Like it doesn't get locked into rottentomatoes.com. It gets locked into the Rotten Tomatoes schema, and anybody can use that schema at any website however they want to. And so it basically is a way of making decentralized, you know, networks and decentralized applications that are modular and interoperable, so you don't have to like be locked in. So if you get kicked off Twitter, your Twitter feed could be something that you own and that you can, you know, basically connect to any website. And so you getting kicked off Twitter just means that your stuff won't appear at their domain name, but it doesn't mean that your followers won't be able to find you somewhere else.
Right. Okay. So to me, it feels like what Web3 should be. I guess, you know, you hear people talk about Web3 and there's all like the Ethereum and Solana and all that stuff. This feels like what it kind of should be, which is like modular in design, open source, and actually decentralized, I guess. Is that kind of, am I right there in saying this is kind of like a good version of Web3?
That's a good way to put it.
Right.
That's one of the goals we're trying to do with the company, is like, as part, obviously like a required goal, if we're going to prove hyper Bitcoinization, we have to also prove why we don't need shitcoins. And so, and so the idea here is to show that like with strictly only using the Bitcoin blockchain, you know, no side chains, no altcoins, you know, strictly, you know, using this as a design limitation, can we actually do all the things that Bitcoiners claim we can do? And do we actually not need other blockchains? And we're basically trying to prove that. We're trying to show how Web3 has nothing to do with blockchains. It has nothing to do with like native assets. It has to do with like interoperability, you know, self-sovereign web concepts, things like this. And you just don't need a blockchain to do that.
John, are you familiar with the Fediverse and like Mastodon and PeerTube? Like, how would slash tags fit in with like federated social media?
I'm not familiar with all those. I'm familiar with concepts within them, but I would say one of the differences between what we're doing and what's been done before is we're taking a very, very abstracted approach. Like basically, if you wanted to create things like, you know, federated networks, or even if you wanted to like add a blockchain to your like identity scheme, slash tag sits on top of that. So you could still have that within a slash tags paradigm if you really wanted it, but it's like another abstraction level over that. And so it's just the model of applying keys and metadata to keys, and that's it. And the rest of it is just all use cases that we build out using that concept and using that protocol. And so, you know, federated networks or Fediverses or such, they're basically like a concept that would exist in any decentralized network, but it is something that kind of locks you in or locks you out. And so slash tags has similar capabilities where, say, your web of trust, you could use that metadata as a permissioning set. You could say, okay, if you are not this type of metadata, you do not have access to this other type of data that I serve. And so you could see how you could map this now to, say, a Twitter or social media, you know, service. And so if my server is serving, say, Mastodon, and I'm using slash tags as the account method for this server, like if you don't meet my capabilities or my requirements to be inside of my web of trust or permissioned into my network, you won't be able to use my instance of Mastodon, you know, and if people come to my instance, they won't see you there because I don't serve your data there. but you could make the same decision against me as well. You could say, I'm not going to serve my data to John's Mastodon. I'm going to serve it to, you know, Harry's Mastodon and Joe's Mastodon and whoever else. Like you create the data locally first, and then you decide how you distribute it. So it's more of an additive and an outward network than something that's public and global.
So my assumption here is that this is going to take some kind of technical know-how in the beginning, right? You've obviously got this protocol that people can use and build upon, and can kind of, I'm sure, create different tools as well. So I guess like the question here is, in the vision that you've got and that your team has got, how sort of is this something that is kind of made to appeal, I guess, at first probably to Bitcoiners, and then kind of expand out and become something that appeals to everyone? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, what is the incentive for my mum, for example, who kind of understands Bitcoin more than most people our age? What is her incentive to actually get involved in this web of trust, in this kind of alternative web? Like, what would it be? I guess, but besides the obvious that it's decentralized, and in my opinion, therefore going to be already better than what we have in the current web.
Yeah. So the beginning of your question, you were talking about developers and building things, and then the end you shifted towards end users, like, you know, normies, I guess you could say. So what I'll say is we're trying to address both sides, and the way we're trying to address it, and some other use cases as well. But the way we're trying to address it is we're not only making a protocol, you know, we're making literally the entire ecosystem. So we're actually going to demonstrate, as we complete each use case with /tags or any of the other technology that we're supporting, like, you know, Omni, Bolt, and other things we can talk about. We're going to demonstrate it by actually putting it into an app to show how you could use this in a way that is user-friendly and gives utility to end users. So for example, like the first use cases that we made for /tags are /tags accounts and /tags contacts. Both of these use cases are just, you know, simple ability to add into any wallet or platform or app the ability to use /tags as a way to, like, open and manage web accounts and log into web accounts. And so when we launch our mobile wallet in a few months, we'll literally show you, like, here is why this is better. Like, you now in your wallet, not only can you store your Bitcoin keys, but you can also store your Lightning, and you can store your Lightning tokens, and you can store your /tags accounts. And you'll basically get to see exactly how we propose this is a better user experience, because you won't have to memorize passwords anymore. You're just going to have to protect your keys. When you want to authenticate, you won't have to, like, give anybody your email address unless that website specifically requires it as an additional piece of information. The only thing you need to, like, be a unique entity on the internet is a key. And this is like the most abstracted form of a user account. And so we're kind of zooming out a little bit and saying, let's start there, give a better user experience for logging in and for managing your passwords, essentially, and then keep building on top of that. So that's /tags accounts, and the wallet will also support /tags contacts. And contacts are just very similar to the use case you're thinking of already with, like, contacts in your phone, except it applies that metadata to a key. And so not only is somebody just listing in a database on your phone, they also have a key associated with them because they're using /tags. And so now that key, you know, opens up a lot of possibilities because it comes like a digital anchor. Like, you could find them on the /tags network. That means that they could have a server that represents them. And so now you can do things like, for example, if I add you as a contact, you could now have like what we'll eventually do is you can now have the capability to, like, tell me which payment methods you support. And I could have my own list of payment methods I support. And so when I want to pay you, I won't just, like, send it to your on-chain address that I have stored. I will actually contact you on the /tags network to get your current list of payment methods supported. And this will all happen in the background. The user won't have to deal with this. And you'll say, okay, I have a Lightning channel and you have a Lightning channel, and we both prefer Lightning. So I'm gonna automatically present you a Lightning invoice for the payment that you want to make to me. Or if you want to pay me on chain, then I'll say, yes, here's my on-chain address that you can pay me at. I'll generate an address for you to pay. And because the ways to pay in Bitcoin are always changing, and we'll always have more. You know, we have, like, legacy, we have multi-sig, we have SegWit, we have Taproot, we have Lightning, we have tokens on Lightning coming. And so we need some kind of way to interface with people to see how we match when we're paying each other. So /tags contacts will enable 2 more /tags use cases that we can build on top of that, which will be like some sort of like pay name or like pay card or some kind of way to do what I just described with resolving how to pay you. And also it'll become like your first step to creating your first web of trust. And so while we don't have the web of trust features shipped yet, and we're not building private networks out of this yet, you'll already have kind of bootstrapped, your first web of trust by creating your contact list. And so we have a very strategic approach to like how we're going to apply the technology, how we're going to demonstrate the technology, and how we're going to include it in actual end user applications to demonstrate the utility of it.
Carvalho, I have a rather pretty I wouldn't say philosophical question, but the idea behind Synonym is based on the conviction or belief that Bitcoin would, based on hyper Bitcoinization, and the belief that Bitcoin is going to take over the monetary policy globally. And I believe that, but to many people that may seem a little bit idealistic. And what would you say to people who feel that Synonym might be kind of like a niche protocol similar to Wasabi, CoinJoin, or even BTC Pay server, where it's just like basically used among people who are Bitcoin centric, who are within our echo chamber, for lack of a better word?
I would say that like most likely that person is probably an altcoiner and probably trying to justify, their investment more than actually speak about any sort of, philosophy or theoretical rationalization of why we're doing or why we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. Because first, like Synonym is a company, and then /tags is an open protocol. It's not tied to Bitcoin. You could use, if you wanted to apply the /tags method to a different curve like PGP or ed keys, like you could use any elliptic curve to establish yourself, as an anchor in a network. It's just the concept of using a key pair to sign things. So /tags, could appear in Ethereum wallets or other things like this. There's nothing stopping it. Ethereum uses the same curve as Bitcoin. And so it wouldn't really be a stretch to see /tags be a model that could be applied in altcoin wallets as well. So as far as /tags goes, it's generally curve or blockchain agnostic. It doesn't use a blockchain. As far as our products and our strategy and our belief in Bitcoin, well, I think that calling it ideal is probably not fair, because there's a lot of rationalization behind it. You could say maybe it's a theory or a hypothesis or this kind of thing, that we could be wrong, but it doesn't require all the altcoins dying or even fiat dying for this to work or be useful to a lot of people. And Bitcoin is already like the majority, cryptocurrency right now, and it always has been. And so it's like it's kind of hard to argue it as an ideal when I'm saying, look, we're just choosing to focus on developing for literally the most popular blockchain, the oldest blockchain, the most secure blockchain, the most valuable blockchain, that blockchain with the most hashing. Like it's kind of, obviously, friendliness aside, it's a shitcoiner concept to be able to say that Bitcoin is an ideal or a niche. You have to basically be comparing it to like fiat currencies instead of altcoins. And at that point, you could say, yes, it's a niche. Very few people using Bitcoin compared to the amount of people that use fiat currency. But the idea here is to like give people an alternative to opt out of the legacy system and create a new system where the users are in control. And I think that narrative and that use case, I don't want to say it's self-evident so much as it's very compelling, and it's certainly useful once people decide that is something that they want to embrace.
John, can you talk about why you chose Omni? Like I felt that was a really interesting choice.
Sure. So I've been trying to get tokens on Lightning ever since I worked at Bitrefill. The original, we had an original strategy that involved, you guys are going to be very familiar with the Bitrefill balance card and the progression of how that like was built into Bitrefill. The next stage of that, was always planned, from my perspective, at least. I hadn't convinced Sergey fully. But, my ideal in that case was to eventually convert the Bitrefill card into a concept of gift tokens on Lightning, and to also kind of use that as a way to kind of spearhead showing other vendors that they could do the same thing. And so basically getting a major gift card vendor to like show how having gift cards as bearer instruments is very useful, and some of the problems it solves for users and for businesses, and which there are a lot, and you can get into it if you want. But your question was about why we chose specifically Omni. So I had tried to, back then, I tried to get some people together, including Tether and some other people, to work on the concept for Lightning tokens for a project called RGB. But the problem is, like, we focused on RGB for 1 or 2 years, and it really went nowhere. And the technology and the people working behind it, I couldn't continue to like bank on that would happen or that it would ever ship. And so we started looking at alternatives, and I had kind of ignored Omni in the past because I didn't actually understand how it worked. I thought that it was like a separate blockchain, and that it had its own like native token, and that you had to use like basically a shitcoin to be able to use it. And so I just ignored it. But then somebody said, look, people kept telling me, you need to look at this. It doesn't work how you think. It doesn't work how you think. And then so when we started playing with it, I was informed that yes, there is an Omni token, but that token is just another token issued on the protocol like every other token. It's just somebody, the organization did an ICO to try to raise money, but it doesn't actually natively require that token. It's just another token issue. I said, okay, well, I would prefer that weren't true, because like it would makes it easier to explain if I don't have to like explain that little, asterisk, side note. But then, it also doesn't use a blockchain. And so if you look at our website, synonym.to, you'll see that we have an area specifically that talks about our design principles. And so like one of our design principles is that we really are trying to have this design limitation I mentioned earlier of only using the Bitcoin blockchain and no other blockchain. And so that basically rules out things like Liquid, things like using Ethereum tokens, and because they all require a separate blockchain. Like Liquid is a private network, it's a federated network, kind of like what you mentioned earlier. And I don't believe that it's possible to communicate to end users the trade-offs that you get into when you start using those things. Like, how do you explain to the end user that this Liquid token is part of a federated network that's private and permissioned, and here are the risks? You just can't really do it inside of a wallet app. And so I just don't want to pass on and make decisions for users. And so we chose Omni because all it is Omni is Bitcoin transactions. And so it uses the op return to include extra information. And so we just Omni has a separate network that tracks basically the metadata about these Bitcoin transactions to be able to track token assignments to these Bitcoin transactions as well. And so you can use Omni to issue tokens on Bitcoin. And then a separate project made by a third party called OmniBolt, they decided to add like basically the same Lightning technology that's on Bitcoin to Omni. And so now one of the other things we're working on is this capability to include, Omni tokens on Lightning Network technology. So you can do like the same high frequency, instant kind of user experience for people, but using things like Tether tokens instead, or gift tokens.
We interviewed Samson Mao, and he was talking about how on Liquid, if you issue a token, Liquid could have its own Lightning network for each token. Is that kind of what you mean by OmniBolt?
Well, there's two concepts there. One is just discussing the concept of putting a Lightning network on something, and then the concept of how, like, no matter what you use, every single asset that you add to a Lightning network is essentially its own Lightning network, because Lightning network is liquidity based, and so you end up needing to rebuild a whole new network for every token that you add. And so like, I don't think we're going to see a lot of like kind of scam tokens on Lightning like we saw on altcoins, because there's this friction there where like you have to actually be a company willing to issue a token on your reputation, willing to bootstrap a new Lightning network just for your token. And so there's a little bit more of a overhead and a little bit more of a hill to climb to make your token actually be Lightning compatible in a meaningful way, because you need to actually serve Lightning channels and sell them to people and start building out that network somehow, which gets into our Blocktank product, our LSP product, which we could talk about as well. And like I said, the other part you mentioned is just putting a Lightning network technology on top of a blockchain. I mean, you could theoretically do this on top of any blockchain. And so Liquid is its own blockchain, but like I mentioned earlier, it is a private blockchain. You have to have permission to be able to use it. There are special rules for who gets to govern the blockchain. There are special rules for who gets to audit the kind of confidential transactions. So it has certain qualities and features that other blockchains won't have, or Bitcoin doesn't have, but it has a lot of trade-offs to achieve those qualities. And so, like I said, like, yes, you can put Lightning on Liquid, but now you have Bitcoin, and then you have converting your Bitcoin into a private network and putting it in custody so you can get Liquid Bitcoin. And then you have your Liquid Bitcoin and tokens, and now you put a Lightning network on top of that. And this is all separate from the existing Lightning network. And so now you have like two Lightning networks, and Omnibolt has the same problem as far as being a separate Lightning network. Every asset you issue does, but this is a separate network. Whereas now, like, we can combine, with the Omnibolt stack, we already have Omni that's literally on top of Bitcoin. It is not a private network. It does not require an extra blockchain. And then we can put Lightning on top of that, so we stay on the Bitcoin stack.
One thing that I guess I'm interested in, actually, because obviously we interviewed you, it was a while back now, actually, wasn't it? But before, anyway, I should say. When did this idea, I guess, come to you, that when did this realization come to you that, hey, we're talking about sort of Bitcoin adoption, and how can I kind of support it by creating this kind of separate web of trust and this separate web? When did this whole idea actually come to mind, I guess? Because it's interesting to see how long you've worked on it. And I guess a side question as well is, like, obviously you've got Paolo as CTO, and so like there's involvement from Tether and Bitfinex. Like, when did you decide that they would be good people to partner with to get this job done? Is another question.
So to answer your first question, it's a combination of things. With slash tags, it's actually something I started to work on before Bitcoin. I used to have a marketing company, and one of the things, we were full service, and so we did branding, graphic design, printing, advertising, any type of marketing. We did SEO, and we did websites. And we got to learn a lot about websites and expectations of small businesses for like the SEO of their websites. And so we ended up, me and another person in the company went to a Google training to like learn all about search engine marketing and Google AdWords and SEO. And so we literally I was a huge Google fan at the time. And so like my dream was actually to like quit my company and close my company at some point and just go work for Google. And so my plan was like and one of my frustrations at the company was it really didn't make sense to me, other than like, a way to like lock people in, that Google didn't just literally publish their weighting algorithm like publicly. Like, I didn't like how like the SEO community was always having to kind of guess what Google preferred, and so they could kind of have some kind of voodoo where they figure out how to get ranked really well. And that to me just seemed like friction that shouldn't be there. And so what I did was I started to design, my plan was to design a concept where I'm going to design a Google killer, and then I'm going to present this to Google as a reason to hire me, because I'm not an engineer. And so I knew that I had to have some sort of special angle to get a job at Google. Like back then it was like so hyped, like the interview process is so hard, and so you have to be a genius to get a job there. And it was like, oh shit, like I don't even know how to program, and I have to like go over there and try to get a job. And I really wanted to work there because I liked all the I like the concept how they had like 20% time where you could work on whatever you wanted. And, it was just so much opportunity. It was like mind expanding, like the way Bitcoin was when I discovered that. And so I did kind of actually work on the idea and how it would work to basically kill Google. And that was the beginning of the idea of slash tags. And so I kind of worked on that, passively for a year or two back in like 2012 or something. Actually, probably even earlier than that, because it was right before Bitcoin. And I started in Bitcoin at the end of 2012. And then I kind of got distracted for a while. I was doing the Bitcoin thing, and then I did the streaming website, and then I worked at Bitrefill. But then while I was at Bitrefill, these ideas started coming back, and I started my mind started expanding again as I saw how people were actually using Bitcoin, like circular economy stuff, and the little hacks people would do to like make their life easier, like with gift cards combined with Bitcoin, and also how people were starting to use stable coins, and how a lot of people were requesting the ability to pay with stable coins and tokens. And so I started doing a lot of thinking about, and Sergey would, he left a big impression on me when I first joined, because he was like, you have to come up with an idea for 100xing this company. And I was like, it wasn't my job so much as like, if I was going to keep proposing ideas, they had to be really good ideas. And so I kind of really took that to heart. And then one day when we were at one of the Bitrefill extravaganza, meetups with the team, I asked him and I asked Justin, I said, hey, could we do tokens on Lightning? And they both said, yeah, probably. And that was it. It was like, okay, now I was like, all right, if this is possible, then that means we can bring gift cards to retail using tokens and blah, 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 blah. And the very next conference I was at was this conference in Malta where Paulo Arduino from Bitfinex and Tether, Giacomo Zucco from RGB, and Oleg from Folger Ventures, who's also an investor in both of our companies, Bitrefill and Synonym. They were all there, and I said, hey, this is what I want to do. And I have this whole strategy for Bitrefill to do gift tokens and blah, blah, blah. And, they all agreed. They all said, okay, let's try to make RGB into this. And so that was kind of the start of, some of where the token stuff came in, how I became closer to Paulo as well, and Oleg, of course. And then we did the integration with Bitfinex while I was at Bitrefill, where we integrated Bitrefill's gift card widget into Bitfinex, and we kind of basically convinced them to add Lightning Network at the same time as a settlement method. And that was the first major exchange to add Lightning. And so that was another way that I got closer to Bitfinex when I was working with them on that. And so finally, I just started coming up with, and you can even ask Sergey about this, when we were in Sweden at a later extravaganza, I was showing him all these mind maps of all these ideas of things that Bitrefill could do and all these different categories. And back then it was a mess, but I started polishing that, and I started really wanting to do all of it. And it didn't become polished until months after I left Bitrefill. But I did kind of I tried to say, hey, I talked to Sergey. I was like, do you think that we could find a way to do these things? And it was just way too much. You know what I mean? It was so off the path Bitrefill was already on. And so I went and asked Paulo. I said, hey, I've talked to you about a lot of ideas of things that I want to do, things that I thought maybe we could do at Bitrefill. If I can't do them at Bitrefill, can I do them with you? And he said yes. And so basically, I left Bitrefill amicably. I still talk to Sergey all the time. I still love Bitrefill. I'm still technically a shareholder at Bitrefill. And so I really, really respect Sergey and your entire team. And so, but I did leave so I could do something, much, much more, I don't know, ambitious, I guess you could say, which is a word a lot of people like to use, which is sometimes an insult and sometimes a compliment. And I spent a few months basically just designing this company, what the product stack would be, and trying to address this hyper Bitcoinization problem. And what I came up with is that, I could figure out the stack of apps and tech that we could use to kind of fill all the gaps for the circular economy. But there was this whole subset of use cases that were missing. And it was basically that Google killer idea. It was how do we attach metadata to things and put search algorithm into the hands of the user instead of the hands of Google or a master website. And that kind of became the foundation of the concept for slash tags. And we worked with a team called Hyper Division. I think they're changing their name now though. And they helped kind of make one or two different versions of slash tags. And they kind of weren't exactly what we were looking for. And then we landed finally on what we have now. And so, yeah, that's a long rant, but that kind of, I think, mostly answers your questions.
It definitely does, and I appreciate it. And it kind of, because I remember the announcement, I was like, oh, I wonder like why and how the whole Bitfinex thing came about, because obviously it hadn't really like occurred or made much sense to me. But that obviously clearly gives me a lot more understanding and background as to like where this idea has come from as well. And technically, it's kind of somewhat been decade plus in the making to a degree, right? Like as you said,
in some ways. And also, like a lot of people think that, like a lot of people take a first glance at what we're doing and they say, oh, it's a Tether company and they're doing tokens on Lightning. It's just all about Tether. But that's actually like that. That's why I tell that story, is because that token was like the token on Lightning stuff was like a side goal that I had since I was at Bitrefill. And that just only made everything else complementary. Like Paulo's interest in this company has very, very little to do with the token stuff. He is very, very interested in seeing like the self-sovereign web kind of concept. He was already working on some things. Like he was friends with the Hyper Division guys and working with them on projects before I arrived. And so they were already trying to figure out how to apply things like decentralized, storage and these kind of networking concepts before I even arrived. And so it was all complementary. Like that's why that it all gelled together. And the reason why it was so easy for me to kind of transition and convince these companies to do this was that they were already wanting to kind of pretty much go in this direction anyway.
Yeah, I was just saying, I can understand why Bitrefill didn't go with this idea, because obviously it doesn't really, as you say, it doesn't really gel with what the
it's a totally different kind of business.
Yeah, it's just
like one of the kind of clutch hinge things that made it was that this vision that I'm doing requires building a wallet like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to be ready to like build a new wallet, build a new user experience in that wallet that includes a bunch of other things that haven't been done before. And that is a huge gap to go from being like Bitrefill e-commerce to being like a software, app building company.
Yeah.
And so I have a feeling that you guys still will end up building a wallet someday, but maybe it'll be more like, combined with the app and that kind of thing.
John, so you've been, prior to launching Synonym, you've been working on this for 2 years. What would you say were your biggest challenges, and what are currently your biggest challenges, building this massive ecosystem?
That's a good question and a rare question. I like to talk about this kind of stuff. That's why I have my own podcast called The Biz, because people don't talk about like how business development works, how anything to do with strategy. It's never part of the conversation. And I think that like one of the first things I noticed when I was doing this is everybody acts like they know how to do this. Everybody acts like they know how to do a startup. They know how to do a Bitcoin startup. They know how to raise money. They know they just talk about it like, oh, always known how to do this. But there's no rules. There's no like reference that you can read that tells you the way to do specifically like making a Bitcoin company. Like it's all really just figuring it out for yourself. And I became very frustrated with that. Like I was having all these really interesting calls with people and having to like figure out my own method for like mind mapping and developing all these ideas. But there was no way for me to share any of that with people. And that was why I ended up making the Biz podcast, was because the original idea was I literally wanted to record all of my private business development calls with people and just publish those. But that turns out to be illegal and in most places. And so I didn't do it that way and just did a business podcast. But so the first challenge was just kind of like discovering everything in the dark, just figuring out how do I go from having no company to having like a vision and, a product, plan, a roadmap and employing people, getting funding, everything like that, signing contracts, negotiating term sheets and all these things. Like they're different every time. And don't let anybody tell you that there's a certain way that everybody does it, because there are no rules to any of this. You just do it how you want to, and you make everybody bend to what makes sense for you. And you just have to make sure that, what you're asking for does make sense, that you have rationalized it and researched it. Another challenge was having to do a lot of research. Like when you're doing like decentralized web tech, it's like endless research. It goes back decades. And so like to make sure you're not making something somebody already made, that you're not like neglecting to leverage something somebody already made, and making mistakes, because I like to say that the decentralized web kind of industry is just riddled with failure. Like nobody other than maybe like Napster, BitTorrent, things like this, like nobody has ever had successes with like getting people to use keys. Nobody has had successes with getting people to like be responsible for their own data. People don't even host their own email anymore. Like everybody just uses Gmail. Even businesses use Gmail. Like it's like the self-sovereign aspect of the web as a culture is basically gone. And we have to try to figure out a way to revive that and justify reviving it, like with actual utility and use cases and incentives for people to stop doing what they're doing and do something else, which is not easy. Sorry, what was the second? Those are some challenges. I mean, I could keep going, but there was a second half of your question. What was it?
What are your current challenges now? Right now?
Oh, the challenges now. So one of the big reasons why we even announced the company when we did, because we're still not done with everything. Like I would have stayed in stealth mode another year. But one of the big challenges is that it's very, very difficult to recruit while you're in stealth mode, because you have no reputation, you have no like hype about you, you have no website, and so to go out and try to recruit people, it was basically like me on Twitter linking people to my Medium blog and having a job listing there. And that's pretty difficult to like find good people, although we did get really lucky, and I am actually really happy with the people we have on the team right now. And so it wasn't so bad, because at least it was people that like already were like associated with my Twitter and followed me, or knew people that followed me. So there was like kind of like a web of trust already. And so it made recruiting not so bad. But for some of the roles, it's just really difficult. And so we announced the company, and so that was one of the current challenges. Another one is learning to scale a company. I've never managed a company that had more than, I don't know, 5 people before. And now, we're approaching 10 people, and we probably need to grow the company into 20 or more people within the next year, just to be able to do all the things we want to do. And so, yeah, recruiting, scaling the company to be like bigger, dealing with the dynamics of like how this is a Tether company. It's not like a normal startup. And so we're kind of like a mixed company with Bitfinex and Tether. And so we like share resources. Like we have, we don't have our own legal team. We use their legal team. We use Bitfinex's HR for things and things like this. So it's like navigating this kind of newly designed sort of company setup was also another one.
I saw a tweet of yours, and I know you mentioned that you've had lots of support from just like you mentioned, you sharing resources with Tether, and had support from Paulo. But on the how much support have you gotten from the wider Bitcoin ecosystem? I saw in the tweet where you said that was on the 17th of November. You said you were disappointed with some of your peers, and that probably what you're launching might conflict with some of their interests and investments. And would you say the support from the wider ecosystem has been underwhelming? And I know you might not want to mention names, but what really happened in that particular scenario?
Sure. I mean, that was a particular moment. I would say overall, the support has been pretty great. People have been very positive. I don't know. We went from 0 followers on our company Twitter account to 4,000 like 1 week. I'm happy with that. Considering how early we are, it was pretty good. We got a lot of great responses, like some coverage in different Bitcoin and crypto news websites and some podcasts and things like that. Like overall, I'm happy with the reception. But that specific tweet that you're bringing up, that was a specific moment where there were like 2 or 3 people that were they had an initial like reaction to our announcement and things like this. And I don't know if it was like the threat of competition or things like this, but those few people, and I won't name them, I was surprised, because there are people that I've known for years and that I've always been able to have like, pretty great discourse with. And so I noticed that their discourse in reaction to some of the things we're doing was a little bit emotional, a little bit biased. And I should have expected it, but I didn't. I hadn't thought about it beforehand and how that might happen. After it happened, I kind of rationalized it and it made sense as to why it happened. But just generally, like, it's like what I said in the tweet, like, when you have your own like Bitcoin company or any company, any startup or anything that you like basically put your, not just your time into, but like, you know, your creativity and your heart into, it's basically your baby. Like this company, whether, even though I'm not the majority owner of this company, it's a tethered company, I consider it to be my baby. And I'm sure that other people consider their companies to be their baby, or specific technology or products that they've built within their company to be their baby. And, you know, when you start seeing other people like kind of compete with your baby, you know, your first instinct is not to collaborate. It's not to expand your mind. It's to kind of like protect yourself. And so I think that, you know, at least rationally explains some of the behavior. And I think we would all do the same thing in the right in certain situations. It's just a human natural behavior, I think. But I do wish, and I would like for the Bitcoin community to be more open-minded about collaborating. And I have a bias for that as well. Like the vision we have and the stuff we're building, it requires a lot of adoption. Like we need like the whole world to adopt /tags. We need all of the Bitcoin community to support and adopt, you know, like tokens on Lightning. Like this is all of this requires a lot of bootstrapping, a lot of adoption, you know, a lot of like learning technology and things like this. And so we need support. And so my philosophy about things has always been like, what I learned is people always just say, oh, don't tell people your ideas. Don't share your product ideas. Don't tell, you know, that they're going to steal them. And what I learned is that basically the opposite is true. Like the more you share your ideas, you know, and the more unique and the more creative they are, the more likely they actually come true. That's just been my experience. Once in a while, you get people kind of steal a thing here or there, or mimic a thing, or ship a thing before you ship it or whatever. But like the amount of that is so small in comparison to just like actually just sharing everything with everybody, that I really, really believe in it now. And I'll go so far as like, for example, like I mentioned the block tank product we have earlier. That's like a server product that is going to be something that we monetize. Most people would never open source that kind of thing, but we will open source it. You know, we'll get a head start on ourselves and, you know, make sure that it all works well and get a few customers into it first. But my philosophy is that like if we open source that we might get everybody else that needs that kind of product and or wants to offer that kind of service contributing to that code and making it better for everybody. And I just really believe that like we have to have a new way of thinking with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin kind of like mitigates middlemen. Like we just don't need middlemen as much as we used to. And so being a middleman is just not as useful as a service anymore. And so you have to actually provide an actual product or service that people need. And so we might as well get used to open sourcing like public resources and public needs and common software, because I think it'll just be better for it.
On Marty Bent's podcast, you mentioned that you are focusing on building you know, like the core products of Synonym, and you had a call to action to other developers to kind of build out the rest of your idea. What are the core products that you guys are working on? Sure.
So first we'll have kind of the thing that's been the most work, which so far at least has been our wallet. We will have a mobile wallet and a Chrome or, you know, browser extension version of the mobile wallet as well. And we've been working on that for a while, and that mobile wallet will include Bitcoin, Lightning, tokens on Lightning, and /tags accounts and /tags contacts. It also includes a few other little things in there of like how we think, you know, we can improve the user experience for Bitcoin and for Lightning. We've kind of rethought the whole user experience for a Lightning wallet, and by integrating that with the next product, which I'll describe, which is Blocktank. Blocktank is a Lightning service provider. It's basically a server. You can think of it a bit like the Thor service at Bitrefill. So basically, we'll also have a web widget that you can use to buy channels. You know, as the public, you'll be able to choose like the local capacity, the remote capacity, and how long you want the channel open. And then we'll price that based off of Bitfinex's, you know, lending rate for Bitcoin on the Bitfinex exchange. So basically, if you'll be able to like rent liquidity of Bitcoin, inside of Lightning Channel, it's a very, very reasonable rate, but we're kind of using that as a way to gauge the rate of locking up Bitcoin into a service. Blocktank will also have it does have an API. We'll release Blocktank formally within a few weeks, probably, but it'll have an API service so you can integrate the server with any platform. So if you wanted to say, give your users of your own wallet, not our wallet, the ability to do the same user experiences as our wallet, you'd be able to do that by integrating with Blocktank API. You'd be able to do it, basically offer the same kind of channel configuration, channel management services that we have for our own wallet and our own products. You'll be able to do that in your own platforms and in your own apps as well. And so Blocktank is just going to be where we build out, this ability to sell, purchase, automate, manage any type of channel things you need as a service. So we have the wallet, which I didn't say the name yet because we're still in legal kind of registrations with the name, but we do have a name for it. We have the wallet. So we have the Blocktank LSP. We have slash tags, which is kind of the web of trust protocol. It kind of brings everything together and has many, many different use cases that we'll release over the next year. And we'll also integrate that into all our products. And then we have our web platforms, which one of them will be a publishing platform, which will basically show how you can use slash tags to actually kill Google and actually, replace existing publishing platforms where you control your content, you monetize your content in many ways. We started to kind of tease some of the ideas with our other product, which is the Biz podcast, where they have this crowd wall concept for how you unlock the content. So we want to have that kind of thing in our publishing platform, which is why we never open sourced the Biz website, because I didn't want people like installing and adopting just this simple podcast, website with one payment feature when we're already trying to build a full-fledged content publishing platform. So you could kind of think of it as a mix between like Google and WordPress and Medium and any podcasting platform. It's just basically going to support every content type you would need and every monetization type you would need, and it's going to incorporate slash tags to be able to make it so you can apply metadata and ratings and filtering and sorting for all this stuff. And then the final product we have is it's kind of a two-part product, which I won't detail too much because it is kind of a unique design and I don't want to leak it much yet. And it's kind of far away. But we have basically a decentralized social media, like a Twitter killer kind of thing that we've designed that we're really happy and proud of. But it's going to take a while to build it out. We need to build out some of the features of slash tags first, et cetera. But yeah, that's the whole product stack of the stuff that we're building and shipping. And then just as a side mention, I'll mention like as an underlying technology that we also support, we use this protocol called Hypercore. And that is used within slash tags, and it will be part of how we build out the publishing platform and the decentralized social media platform as well. But Hypercore is basically a protocol that's very similar to BitTorrent, except it's got more cool modernized features for current times. And one of the more interesting aspects of it is the files that are made out of append-only logs. And append-only logs are sort of like databases that function a little bit like a blockchain. Like you can't change the past and you can prove it. And so these append-only logs are also locked by key pairs, and all the content within them is content addressable with key pairs as well. And so just I won't rant too much, but this basically opens up all of the kind of decentralized storage and Oracle concepts and, abstracted encrypted storage and all these kinds of use cases that people kind of have wanted for a while, and allows us to kind of do true decentralized social media and the other stuff that I've talked about.
I got one final question for you, which has kind of come about from what your answer you gave. First off, I love the ideas, which is pretty clear. I think most people are quite into them, especially the Twitter killer. Please, for the love of God, bring that
I wish
to
we
the
were
world.
done already. I really do.
I can't wait for that product. But I guess the question I've got now is, I can see how Blocktank, there's monetization in there, and obviously because you guys are creating a company, right? So my question is like, how we on some of the other things like the protocols and the other things you're building, like even the decentralized social media, how are you going to seek to monetize that? Is like, I guess the thing that came to mind is, it all sounds awesome, but I'm thinking from a company perspective, how are you going to monetize some of these things?
For the moment, there's two simple ways, like you mentioned, Blocktank. I think that, you know, when you consider that for the moment, Blocktank is just doing Lightning, but there'll be other services that will add on top of it. Like, for example, once we have Tether on Lightning, Blocktank will also sell Tether channels as well. And so that's another, you know, and this plugs into our own apps, and it plugs into any other app. So any wallet that wants to be able to offer Bitcoin and Tether channels to their users will be able to do it through Blocktank as well. And then Blocktank will also, you know, be the storage provider when we map in this hypercore technology to be able to do like basically a decentralized storage market. And so we'll show how you can apply slash tags and have like basically a reputation sort of Oracle system for having a decentralized storage market, and you can use that as another basis. And so Blocktank will participate in that market of like this abstracted kind of encrypted hosting. And so that we have monetization there with Blocktank, with kind of just networking and internet, kind of storage and liquidity services. And then also just the very simple thing of in the wallet, we'll eventually add the feature probably around the summertime. We want to release the wallet in the spring, like March or April. And then maybe in the summertime, like, you know, a quarter or so later, we'll add the ability to actually just buy Bitcoin and buy Tether and maybe buy, you know, Bitrefill tokens or any, you know, any actual token we want to support in Blocktank and support at Bitfinex, et cetera, that is on Lightning. If it's something that falls within our design principles, we'll consider whether to provide liquidity for it. And that liquidity can include liquidity on Lightning or just the ability to buy it in the wallet. And so eventually you'll have the capability to, you know, make an account in the wallet, KYC if necessary for the amount that you're trying to buy, and just sell Bitcoin and Tether to people.
Understood. That makes a lot more. It makes it clear to me. Because say that was just one question that, you know, came to mind.
And I think it's okay. Like, sorry, but
no, go ahead.
Like, I didn't mention monetization for like the publishing platform or for the social media platform because, in my opinion, there is no honest way to do it. Like we could do like scammy things, like have like a native token to the platform, or take a cut of everything everybody does some weird way. Like, but none of those things would be natural. We just literally would be injecting ourselves where we don't need to be. And so those things don't have monetization strategies because they're decentralized open platforms. And so what my philosophy is that everybody will be using and paying each other with Bitcoin, with Lightning, and with tokens on Lightning. And everything that I've described to you, our whole stack, is part of an economy. Like you're going to want to monetize and permission everything that you do. And so you're going to need Bitcoin to do it. You're going to need tokens to do it. You're going to need liquidity to do it. And so in order to have the scale of this monetary network, you're still going to need to buy stuff from Blocktank and buy Bitcoins from our wallet and, you know, that kind of thing.
I think, yeah, that's reassuring on the social media side and other sides, because I think you're right. Like, there's so many opportunities. There's a lot of times where I see something, I think, oh, this is actually quite a cool idea, and then I go on the website and it's got its own token, which immediately you think, oh,
happened to me yesterday, man. Like, I didn't realize, but I had met the guy from Sovereign at the conference in Atlanta, and apparently we had a nice, you know, cordial conversation. But yesterday he got into one of my tweets and was saying like, oh, maybe you guys want to work with us on doing, you know, zero token. I'm like, what the fuck is zero token? Like, and like, so I start replying to him like I normally would on Twitter, like being rude, not realizing I've already met the guy and had a nice conversation. But like all I had to do was like glance at what he was showing me, and it's like they have a pre-sale, they have a native token, they're saying they have 0% loans, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, I don't want any part of this. And so, you know, yes, that guy, if he wants to, can issue his token on Lightning with our technology and whatever, but it will never appear in Blocktank. You know, it'll never appear in our wallet as something you can buy from us. Like, it just doesn't meet my design principles.
I understand that. Yeah. There's a lot of this. There's a lot of push for decentralized social media, right? With Twitter getting strange in the last like week since Jack down. It was strange anyway in general before that. And yeah, like I was in Jordan Peterson's recent post, like some company had commented, you know, or some decentralized social media thing, Deso something or other. And I went, okay, this is an interesting idea. So click on the website. I think, okay, All right, okay, and then you click on, I'll buy their token or whatever. I thought I'll click on it, see where what happens. You know, takes you to BitClout. I thought, for God's sake, it's just like, is this just BitClout wrapped as some sort of?
Yeah.
I think they're just trying to wrap their scam in like 50 layers. And I thought, okay, well, you know, it's pretty disappointing. So yeah, I trust.
Sometimes I'll tell you it's relieving also, because like while there's nothing quite exactly like slash tags that I found, I have found some things that are somewhat similar. Like they cover some of the use cases we're trying to do. But when I see that they're gonna like add a token to it, I'm like, whew, good. They're not gonna be real competition.
That's true. Yeah. No, I like it. I think
I've seen a lot, and I've seen lots of social media, decentralized social media. I'm not sure if they're really decentralized, but I think these ideas have been coming up for a while. We've been hearing noises here and there. I think Steemit was one of those who said they were actually decentralized social media before they actually went crashing down. In your opinion, what John, this is for you. What do you think is the biggest challenge to creating the decentralized social media, a Twitter killer? What do you think you're actually doing different that you're convinced will succeed?
This might sound a little weird, but I think the biggest difference is like we were in our design process, we were incorruptible. Like basically we weren't willing to say like, and we were well researched. So removing ignorance and removing greed from your design process will free you to actually design useful things. Otherwise, if you start injecting greed, or you're too uninformed or ignorant about what you're trying to design, you're going to end up making things that are either corrupted or poorly designed. And so the difference with, I hope, obviously we haven't proven anything with our design for decentralized social media yet. We could fail as well, and we could fail because of ignorance, but it won't be because of corruption and greed, because that like we were just discussing, like if you decide from the beginning that you need a blockchain for everything, all right, so now you're ignorant and probably also greedy, because you're just wanting to inject this idea of like making money somehow on a pre-sale or token, or getting rich off of the token because you had early access to it. This is essentially creating the same like Cantillon effects of fiat. And fiat, the system is obviously very corrupted. It's very corruptible. And so I think that, that's the confidence I have in our design, is that we chose design restrictions, like those design principles on our website, and we have more than are on the website as well. But we use those as like strict guidelines, strict borders of what we could and could not do. And I found that when we did that, it actually became very freeing and made us very creative. And so it's like once you realize where the edges of your paradigm are, what you're working with. And I don't actually think there is at the moment with existing technology a more like streamlined or rational way to approach the problem than the way we're approaching it. Like for me, it all made sense because it made sense as primitives. It's not because like, we want people to do what we think is cool or what our friends do or whatever. It's because I literally could not find a better way to do it. And that's the way I think you should design things like this.
Well, there's a lot of things I want to ask, but I'm also aware that we're running pretty long, so we should probably wrap it up. But maybe that means there's a third podcast in the future. Who knows?
Anytime, man. Anytime. Always happy to.
Yeah, it's been awesome to have you on, and I definitely think that my understanding of Synonym and your plans and intentions is a lot clearer. So I think that's good news for me, and also for the listeners as well, who will hopefully be hearing about that. But yeah, I guess just thank you so much for joining, and also thanks you guys for co-hosting as usual. Is there any kind of final words you wanted to say? Any kind of promotion? Obviously, we said synonym.to is the website. I think it's _to for Twitter. Synonym _to for Twitter. Is there anything else that you wanted to say?
Just generally, like I want everybody to understand that I do appreciate that this vision and some of these designs and products we're making a lot of claims, we're being very ambitious. Some of it is overwhelming or confusing, or asking a lot of people to try to digest. I would just say, just put a little bit of faith in us, show us a little bit of support, and we'll pay it back like tenfold. I really am trying to be as genuine as possible to try to help Bitcoin and help Bitcoiners. And that is my priority above everything. And I think it's our whole team's priority. Like everybody on our team like kind of feels the same way and has like very similar like principles and things like this. And so everything is very principled, very rationalized. And so I would just say, if you encounter something that you think maybe doesn't make sense or you disagree with about what we're doing, just try it on and ask questions, and we'll try to explain it. But in the meantime, like also, remember that even though some of this is a bit much, that we are going to take the time to show it to you, like in an app where like everything we're doing, we will demonstrate it. And so it's not going to be only that I'm hoping everybody builds stuff with it and expands their minds and does stuff without us. I also want them to be reassured that we're literally going to take the time to show you exactly how to do it and exactly what's possible within applications. And we want everybody to adopt it and copy everything we're doing and compete with us as hard as they want to, because I think that's the path forward. As far as promotional stuff, I would say, the website, synonym.to, the Twitter is synonym_to, the biz.pro is the website for the podcast. And then, just keep an eye out for our products. We have Block Tank, we have slash tags. Please, like if you're a dev or somebody, like play with it. We also have the Omni Bolt JavaScript library ready for any devs that want to start playing with tokens on Lightning early. But that technology is currently being audited. So, come spring, we'll have a lot more stuff to show and a lot more stuff that you guys can kind of analyze and play with. But until then, any support, any interest, we're recruiting. We have several job roles open, but also just in general, if you're somebody like that is really interested and you don't see a job role appropriate, but you think you can help somehow, be creative, tell me what job you think you should have here and contact me. I think we're always only limited by our own creativity. And so I'll leave it at that.
I like that final statement. Yeah, I guess you never know. There could be someone who's not even a developer or anything like that, but they could have some genius idea for how they can help the vision move forward. So why not, right? Get in touch. Well, again, thanks so much for joining us, man. It's much appreciated. Always a pleasure. And thank you to everyone for listening as well. We've appreciated all of you, each and every one of you. So everyone have a lovely day, week, afternoon, year, month, whatever, whenever you're listening, and take care and keep on buying Bitcoin.